Okay, we're on day 21 of the Undercover Police Inquiry. We've been listening to the live evidence of the former undercover police officer, Peter Francis. Peter Francis, uniquely amongst the SDS officers, went whistleblower in 2010, so has been speaking much more candidly about his time inside the SDS. We've heard from other police officers who've been called to give evidence. I'm joined by Dave Smith from the Blacklist Support Group. Dave, what do you make of what we've heard from Peter Francis this morning?
Well, first of all, it's very early doors.
Sure.
You know, I mean, it's, you know, he's speaking for 4 days, potentially 5 days. And so all we've really had at the moment is when he first joined the police, you know, what his training was and, you know, what his attitudes of other police officers were. But even already, you know, talking about widespread sort of sexist attitudes amongst the police and also amongst the SDS officers, the undercover officers, you know, stories about, you know, one of his managers telling him to make sure he used his own condoms. It talks about trips to Amsterdam where they were, you know, I think that the quote was something along the lines of, you know, that he was being asked about drug use and sex workers, and the advice he was given is when you know, this was a whole team of the undercover officers going on a field, you know, like a team building exercise kind of thing to Amsterdam, and then being told when they got back to London and their managers talked about it to you know, play up the cultural aspects of the trip rather than the recreational aspects of the trip.
Yeah,
you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, he said basically every undercover officer apart from HN78 partook in drugs whilst in Amsterdam. He said he didn't witness any other undercover officers having sex with sex workers. He claims that he personally didn't, but that he wasn't witnessing that anyway. They all went to the red light district. Who knows what went on? Just before we went to the break, he was being asked specifically about the manager, Bob Potter, who appears to have been like grossly racist, and talking about the racist manner in which he acted, not only in front of the other white officers, but also in front of the only black undercover officer at the time, Trevor Morris. We heard that thing about the use your own condom apparently was something he had to be directly told by Bob Lambert, as the previous advice he'd had was just to use condoms. But Bob Lambert was, oh no, make sure it's your own condom, because a previous undercover officer had been caught out from using a condom that had been supplied by an activist. I think this is the something that we heard when Bob Lambert was giving evidence. We heard from Jackie was that you know, he'd somehow tricked into getting someone pregnant. Was the idea, and this sort of like plays into that. He's been given. He was just thanked actually before we went to the break. He was thanked before the break by John Mitting, which is quite unusual, and it was specifically to do with something that we're not allowed to talk about. There was a section of the morning session where the stream was taken off and went back on again. It wasn't a breach. We can't exactly say what it was about. It was about DCI Keith Edmondson and something about him, which we can't refer to. But once again, it shows that there is a great aspect of this inquiry which is taking place in secret outside of these hearings. Yeah, what are your thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, to be honest, it went over my head. I didn't quite get what he was talking about that we weren't allowed to hear. It didn't seem that much more revelatory than the rest of the stuff that was being spoken about, to be honest. The stuff about the racism stuff, though, I mean, that was, you know, if there's anything that comes out of this morning, it was the racism abuse, really. I would have thought, you know, where he says, you know, when he was first deployed, you know, the only training he's ever had as a police officer, you know, whether it was at Hendon, you know, in some small little module at the beginning of, you know, his basic police training, no training on racism in Special Branch or in the SDS, but, you know, basically, I think he said something along the lines of, you know, racist attitudes is really, really widespread, you know, certainly within the even more vocal and even more widespread in inner London, and when he was on the riot squad, you know, which he talks about being on the riot squad, you know, he talks about, you know, he described what kind of attitudes, and he was talking about, oh yeah, more, you know, black people have more propensity to be violent, more propensity to be criminals, you know, of low intelligence, and then he had some, I'm sure he was trying to make. I'm not quite sure what he was trying to say, but it didn't come over very well when he was, you know,
about the career prospects for black people. Yeah, I was a bit confused by that myself.
Yeah, and like being in, but also, as you said, being in a meeting where you know, a manager of the SDS made, you know, racist jokes about you know, black people in front of a black officer, and he said, no, I didn't say anything, nobody else says anything. At the time we thought it was quite funny, but even if I didn't, who would dare to challenge a manager who could affect your career prospects? And I'm looking, thinking, well, to be honest, that's what trade unionists do all the time, you know, challenge managers who are racist or challenge managers who are abusive. You know, perhaps no police officer thought that was a thing to do, an acceptable thing to do. Perhaps that's one of the reasons that they consider trade unionists to be subversive by our very nature. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's very strange hearing the evidence of an undercover police officer where you're hoping to find things out. I mean, we're so used to hearing undercover police officers give evidence, and it's always, I don't remember, I couldn't say, you know, dialing things down, minimizing, and like keeping things secret. It is quite different hearing from Peter Francis, but there's no mistake, he's definitely a cop.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll go on record and say that I've got the utmost respect for Peter Francis for when he became a whistleblower. You know, exposing wrongdoing clearly has affected his health, his, you know, his career prospects, and his, you know, his ongoing life really. And you know, so doing this for 15 years, fair play to him. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. But also, he was an undercover police officer, you know, and his training as an undercover police officer and his mindset while he was an undercover police officer are the mindset of an undercover police officer. You know, we shouldn't fall into any trap that he's sort of, you know, he's a comrade.
Absolutely. Things about to restart. We should head back in. It's
All right.
only a short break. We'll join again at lunchtime. We'll have a further update from what's been said. Thanks for joining us.
All the best.